All right. Hello, Idiots on Parade, the Too Ugly for TV podcast, bonus podcast. That is my good friend, Barrett Antar Goodwin, musician in New York City. Hi, Barrett.
Hey, how are you, sir?
I am well. I am Nathan Timmel, comedian in Iowa City. Barrett and I have known each other for more years than we're willing to admit to, because then, you'd know our age and how close to AARP we are. So we're just gonna hide that and pretend we're younger than we are. We're hip and cool, right? We're into what the kids are into, and
that's right. We're into that funky, fresh stuff that the kids like.
Skateboarding and going to the roller rink and
Exactly.
arcade games.
The drive-in.
What?
Actually, the drive-in's coming back now. It's like a thing now. Literally, the drive-ins are like the most popular places now.
I'm taking the kids on Saturday. It's not a drive-in, it's a setup one at the local airport. But I've tried to take them to two. Each one is an hour on either side of me, and my wife won't do it because, it doesn't start till 9, and then they'll be in a car for an hour after that. I'm like, come on, let's just do it. But then they for the month of, they put one at the local airport. They said it's free. You just got to register and sign up your car. So yeah, I'm taking them this Saturday.
Oh, that's awesome.
It's on my daughter's birthday and our wedding anniversary, as I mentioned. And at the end, you'll plug your gig. You have a gig this Saturday, right?
I do indeed.
Yeah, we'll talk about that. All right. Anyway, so that's our story, is college roommates and friends, and we talk and we record it and see where it goes. What I wanted to talk about today was very interesting. That how the old saying, like, you buy a car and then you see that car everywhere.
Mm-hmm.
I saw this. I think it was a meme or maybe a news article. I don't remember. It was a sentence that just, once I saw it, it was like, holy shit, that just makes all the sense in the world. Why was I not ever able to articulate that? Because it just spoke such truth to me. Then it started repeating itself. I was listening to a podcast and they brought it up. And then I experienced something with a friend, which we'll get into. That was along the same lines. The quote that hit me was, and I'm going to paraphrase because I didn't write it down, but basically the discussion or the article was saying that the problem with information these days is most good investigative journalism hides behind a firewall, whereas conspiracy theories and bullshit are just on blogs and YouTube videos. And I've experienced that a million times. I'll see an ad for like the Wall Street Journal and the New York Times, and they're like, ooh, coronavirus update. And I'll click it and it goes, subscribe now, give us money. And I'm like, fuck you. And I get it. They need money to say, they have to pay reporters to, do the investigating and the writing, and it costs money, but it explains why misinformation spreads. If good information costs money and stupidity is free, guess what people are going to pay attention to when they click on it? They're going to be like, oh, I can't read that, but this video is free. And it just made nothing but sense. You got any thoughts on that?
That's true. Yeah, I think it's really true. And I think it's really interesting because I think that in a world where, like, not only are things covered, they're hidden behind a paywall, they're also in a particular situation in which, like, because of social media, we're all trained to want people to pay attention to us. So there's a lot of impetus for regular people just to go and put out their opinion. And because of some stuff, if you get it to be divisive, you will get followers. And it really does feel good when people like your stuff. Do you know what I mean? So, like, you can have a blog or a YouTube page or a thing, and I'm trying to think of an example of someone who started off reasonable and then just turned into, like, over time, turned into a real shithead because
I have
of it.
two thoughts while you think. One, you made me think of that famous part of Howard Stern where you talk about if you be divisive. They were like, oh, people who love you listen for 10 minutes. Oh, and people who hate you listen for 20 minutes. What? Why? And the line was, they want to hear what he'll say next. They remember that line in the movie? Yeah.
Vaguely.
So you made me think of that. But at the very end where you said you were trying to think of someone, I thought of Alex Jones, not because he falls into that category, but because he does not. I listened to a podcast. I can't remember. Oh, it was about the year 2000. It was about the Y2K bug. It was a very interesting podcast. It was 6 short episodes. and they played an Alex Jones podcast or radio show back in the day. He was on from 1999, and he was ranting and raving and saying, the government forces are kicking indoors right now. They're taking over the country. This is so he's never changed. He's always been a fucking lunatic. It was just weird to hear that and go, wow, people still listen to him. I mean, you could play that tape of things that were not happening that he was insisting were happening, and people still listen to him. But maybe that's our problem, is neither you or I seem to be divisive enough. It's we have thoughts and we try and articulate them and listen and go, maybe we just need to start saying the most outrageous shit, whether or not we believe it, just to get people angry. So then they watch and comment and get angry at us, and then it spreads, and then people take our side, and then people take the other side. And I don't want any part of that, but that seems to be, as you said, one of the ways to get popular.
Yeah, it comes down to the authenticity thing, though. You know, like I think at the end of the day, I think that, and who knows if my theory is correct? It's just a theory I'm going to work with these days. I feel like there's so much bullshit out there that it takes something genuine to rise to the top and have any staying power. Do you know what I mean? Like I just don't know. Like I was listening to Ray Charles the other day, and I was like,
Good
man,
stuff.
this is like some good stuff. You know what I mean? And it's just like, and it's like, you know, it's cliche. Of course, Ray Charles or Aretha or whatever. It's like, yeah, but there's a reason.
Yeah.
Like, it's not like a fad, like everybody likes Aretha and Ray because like it's the popular thing to do. You know what I mean? Maybe it was, but it's also because it's just fucking good. You know what I
Well,
mean?
I'll give you I'll take your example and build on it in a weird way, if you're okay with it. Stevie
Hmm.
Wonder. There's a
Yeah,
reason his work in the 70s still gets played, and his stuff in the 80s gets mostly ignored. I mean, what are you going to put on?
right,
Living in the City or Jungle Fever?
right. Yeah, I mean, yeah, the 80s was rough for everybody.
Not Slayer.
Well, that's true. It's Slayer, Metallica, Motley Crue,
Yeah.
the birth of rap, which grew into hip hop. A lot of amazing things were born in the 80s. That's true.
Someday I
Um,
will write an essay on how Motley Crue was the most important band of the 80s. I can
yeah.
argue it. I will go into a debate club and argue that.
All right.
I mean, do you
I,
want my reasoning right now?
I'm scared, but yes.
Well, everybody copied them. Everybody in the metal world, not the rap and not the pop, but think about it. When they came out, not so much with Too Fast for Love, because that wasn't big, but when Shout at the Devil hit, they launched. And so suddenly everybody was looking at them going, wow, they've got the war paint, and not like Kiss, but Kiss had already taken theirs off, and the leather and the scary. So everybody kind of did that. Then when they said, okay, we've already done that, they came out with Theater of Pain. What happened with Theater of Pain? Everybody went glam. Bon Jovi came out of nowhere. Ozzy Osbourne started wearing glitter. I mean, look it up. Kiss wore glitter. Everybody, Cinderfella, Brittany Fox. So Motley Crue then said, all right, we're not doing that again. They put on jeans and leather for girls, girls, girls. Suddenly Bon Jovi and Kiss and all the other bands are taking off the glitter and just dressing normal, or like biker wannabes or something like that. And then going back to Theater of Pain, Motley Crue puts out Home Sweet Home. It goes huge. Suddenly, even not Iron Maiden, but Judas Priest and every band, Kiss, had to have a power ballad. Ozzy Osbourne. I know I'm saying the same three bands, but I mean there were other ones in there like Rat who were one-offs. But everybody copy Motley Crue. From Shout at the Devil all the way to Dr. Feelgood, Motley Crue set the terms for hair metal in the 80s. Did anything I just say, was anything wrong? They were the first ones. Everybody followed them to glam. Everybody gave up glam when they gave it up. Everybody started putting out a power ballad
I
as
mean,
either.
do you think that they were just ahead of the curve and everybody just caught up after the fact? Or do you think that people were actually legitimately following in their footsteps?
I think that, well, following the curve is pretty much saying what's already out there. Shit, we need to do that. And that's what every other band was doing, at
Yeah.
least in the metal world. Not Metallica and Slayer,
Interesting.
but you know what I mean. In that hair metal popular world. And when was that VH1 show when 80s ruled the world, or when metal ruled the world about the 1980s? I mean, kids today, and I don't mean that in the old man way. Kids today, I mean, they don't understand how big metal was and how pervasive it was, because I don't think there's anything like that today. I know rap is everywhere and country's everywhere, but diversity's everywhere. You do have rap and country, and you don't really have metal anymore. I mean, metal dominated the 80s, and Motley Crue dominated metal. So maybe I don't need to
Interesting.
write the essay. I've just laid it out right there. Argue point.
I mean, I wouldn't be able to know the fine details enough to argue it. I would say, second story I'm telling about this guy today. Uh, One of my friends was a manager, and he said, if you want to make a lot of money, make music that makes young white kids want to smash shit. If you want to make money, you make something that makes young black kids want to smash shit. But some boys got to be smashing some shit if you want to make some money. And I was like, that's funny. And it's not necessarily
Funny.
true, but like, but there is an argument to be made that like the pop, the like that rap in the day and metal in the day were the same music for two different kinds of people, for right the same demographic. Like you could argue that like death metal and gangster rap, if the lyrics in death metal speak to the lives of those kids in some kind of profound way, that it's the same. That it's the same music, right? It's the
I
same
would agree with you. Yeah,
emotions
I hear
just
where you're coming
put to
from.
music. You know what I mean? And
Yeah.
I was like, oh, and it's not a hard and fast rule, obviously, but it is a guideline. I was like, oh, he's
But
got a
also crossed
point. You know
over,
what I
because
mean?
not with the gangster rap, but who? No, with Public Enemy, Anthrax and
Yeah,
Public Enemy.
Anthrax, Public Enemy.
Yeah, they
Hmm.
met in the middle, like they admired one
Right,
another. They were both New York. Weren't Was
right.
Public Enemy New York?
I think so.
Yeah,
I don't know for sure though.
but either way,
But
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 they
then you
crossed
also
and they
had
made.
Run DMC and Aerosmith,
Yeah,
which I
yep.
was like, and I could totally see that, right? I could totally see that as a pairing. I couldn't see Run DMC with Anthrax or
No,
Public Enemy with Aerosmith. You know what I mean? But you're right. It's like the same kind of energy. Do you know what I mean? The same kind of stuff. You know, and I think that had Anthrax come out a few years later, like the Rage Against the Machine time, they would have been more like Rage. Do you know what I mean? They would have had lyrics more like
I
something
can
like
see that.
that,
Well, they
and
kind of
I could,
did.
you know what I
Their
mean?
Among the Living was kind
Yeah.
of political. They had the song Indians because
Hmm.
I can't think of his name. The lead singer was Native American, and
Right.
yeah, the song was about Native rights.
Right. Yeah. Like I think that
So
had
they were
they
slightly
come up in a time where political lyrics were more what was acceptable for pop radio, right? I think they would have done that, which would have been interesting.
yeah.
Anyway, well, there you go. Look at you taking us on an '80s detour.
Why
I'm
not?
putting my
Well, let's
Tom
steer
was it
back to the
Tom
news
Cruise
then, if you
glasses?
want.
Yeah.
Okay, so I'll try and get us back on track. I'll tell you the experience I had with a friend of mine online, but he's a friend. I've met him. I know him. We've been I've known him since about 2004, I think, and we've been, I don't want to say growing apart, but drifting in a way that politically, not personally, not like, but he seems to be going more white liberal woke, and I seem to be going more centrist. And what happened today, this happened this morning, is last night before I went to bed, I saw something on Twitter, and I went, "Oh, that's got to be a joke." And I woke up this morning, and it was on the news.
It was.
And I'm like, "Wow, that's silly." So I searched for and this all ties back into the beginning. I searched for the story, and I had three sources come up, and two of them were protected by a firewall, but Fox News was not. So I just pulled it. I said, all right, I'm going to post a link to Fox News because they allow you to show the story. And my buddy commented on it and said, Fox News, I'm not clicking that. That's bullshit. I'm not giving them the clicks. I'm not giving them whatever, blah, blah, blah. I don't believe it. He said, I'm not buying it. He goes, that's bullshit. I'm not clicking on it. I'm not buying it. And I'm like, huh, all right. And then someone else posted below that a link to the same story, only not from Fox News. And he goes, oh, okay, yeah, I guess it is true. And I'm like, and he had said a couple months ago, he had talked in detail about the sources he trusts and gets, and they were very, very narrow. He had a very narrow view of sources he trusted or that he watched. And I'm like, okay, I get news from everywhere. And it's one of those things where I personally, okay, if I'm clicking on Fox, I know it's going to have a slant to the right. If I'm clicking on MSNBC, it has a slant to the left. So somewhere in the middle is going to be the truth. So I look at it all and determine where the fluctuation is. But I don't really outright dismiss anything. I mean, I can outright dismiss Sean Hannity or Tucker Carlson because for the most part, they're blowhards. They're not news. They're just commentators. But when it comes to news, again, there will be variations to one side or the other, but to completely say I'm not clicking on that and I don't trust it and it's bullshit because of the source, yeah, I get that when it's the Drudge Report, but what are your thoughts there? And again, the reason I chose that one is because the other two were protected by firewalls, and I couldn't post them. I'm like, well, if I post this, people just say can't see the article. One of those bait and switch things where, oh, look at the thumbnail, click this. Nope, you can't see it.
I mean, I have a real issue with the way that information is put forth these days. I think it's really, really terrifying that as a the young people are growing up in a time in which they literally can't trust anything. Like when
They
you and I,
shouldn't trust anything.
right?
They do,
Yes,
but they
they
shouldn't.
do, but they shouldn't. Yes, because when you and I were kids, and I don't say this to sound funny, but like science was science. You just trusted it. You know what I mean? The politicians were politicians, and you knew they were kind of lying and taking a little bit from everybody and skimming a little bit off the top and a little bit off the bottom and shaving some off the middle. But you still thought that they were going to take care of you. Do you know what I mean? Like they still gave you some shit. Like I grew up in a Democrat family, but like nobody, like when Reagan was president, like my parents, it sucked, but it didn't really suck. You know what I mean? Like it was like he did some shit that was fucked up, but it didn't feel like what it feels like today politically. My parents did not feel like what parents feel like today. Do you know what I mean? Like they didn't feel like it was very relaxed. Like, do you know what I mean? I can remember the Bush years as being like shitty, but like I mean, it wasn't this. Do you know
Well,
what I mean?
I
Like, you know,
I can't tell you the first one, maybe 2000. I don't know. Do you remember being a kid and even a teenager and even a young adult? And the elections were not the most important election of our lifetime. I think
right.
that started somewhere around 2000, where suddenly that election was the most important of our lifetime. Then 2004, because we're at war. Then 2008, because there's a black guy running. Then 2012, because, oh my God, the black guy's been president for 4 years. Then 2016, because holy shit, we have this asshole running. And now 2020, holy shit, the asshole's president. I mean, every
Yeah,
election has been the most important one because it's been built up more and more to be this as
yeah.
opposed to Reagan, which was don't like him, but we can eventually vote him out. Shit, he got voted back in. All right, don't like him, but he's done. He can't run a third time. Shit, Bush Senior got in. Like it was unhappy, but
Yeah.
actually maybe even earlier with Clinton, with Newt Gingrich, maybe that's when it started, which was they really started saying, we got to get this guy out of here, and they went after him with everything.
I mean, yeah. Yeah. I think that, but can you imagine, like, if you were born in 2005, let's say you're 15 years old right now, you've grown up in a time post 9/11, so everything is scary, right? Like, like when we were kids, we ran around. Our parents were, I think, the first generation of people to start getting divorces kind of routinely.
Hmm.
Do you know what I mean? Like we were alive in the time when you could be a latchkey kid, right? And you could have two different homes, and like that was like a brand new thing for it to be really widespread. Do you know what I mean? Because it wasn't like, you know, it was a weird thing. So we grew up in a weird time period, I think, where we had freedom and we and our just living life gave you critical thinking skills because you had freedom. Like you would leave and do shit.
I wasn't rolling my eyes at you. The cat's not allowed in the basement, and it just ran in here.
Uh,
So that's I was
it
that's
happens.
yeah.
Um, but you know what I mean? And I think kids nowadays grow up in a post 9/11 world where everything is scary and everything has bumpers. You make a joke
Yeah. Was
about
everything scary
the
to the kids, or it's scary to the parents who then instill that fear into
right,
the
who
kids? They
then
don't let the
right,
kids do anything.
right. I mean, you know, a couple of kids end up on milk cartons, and all of a sudden everybody's like, nobody's kid can leave the house. And but you have the joke about it where you're on the
Well, you saw
swing
that
and
study,
shit.
right?
You
Sorry,
know,
I didn't mean to, what joke were you
no,
talking about?
you have the joke where you're on the swing joke where you
Oh
walk
yeah, yeah,
there
the
with the swing
playground
and you
joke.
get
Yeah,
all
yeah,
fucked
yeah,
up and now you bounce. You
yeah.
know what I mean? And there's no
The milk
seesaw
carton thing. Did you
anymore, right?
hear
You know
that
what I mean?
study or that report? Or they've done, like, the number of kid kidnappings has gone down, but the paranoia has gone up because when the kids went on
Right,
the milk cartons, as
right,
our parents discover, oh shit, kids can get taken, then yeah, the awareness is what spread it.
right.
It wasn't, there wasn't a
That
spike in kidnappings. It
I
was
mean, right. That Oprah, right? What
yeah,
wasn't Oprah started telling people about pedophiles dressed up like they disguise themselves as ice cream men and shit? You're like, oh my god, like people, but like that wasn't us. Do you know what I mean? Like we were too young to be affected by it, but also too old to be affected by it in a weird way. But like people who were our age during the Oprah time or a little bit older than us, like people who are a little bit older than us, so their kids are now like like 30, you know what I mean? Like people like that. Those people were adults during that time. So they were like young adults getting formed in scary shit. And then they went and off and had children, and now their children were overprotected. Now kids are even more overprotected. You grew up at a time when you weren't protected, but your kids are overprotected. Maybe not by you, but by everything else in society. And now you have, and so I feel like the kids nowadays have no, there's nothing for them to trust. There's all these rules and regulations. There's this crazy shit. Like it's like a perfect storm. Do you know what I mean? Like I don't, like I don't. Yeah.
I do, but I think it depends on maybe where you are or who you are, because my neighborhood, and I'm only speaking just the small, there are three, four, five families where all the kids play together, and we
Mm,
never know where they are. Like, we just get these mass
yeah.
texts at 4 o'clock. All right, where are the kids? I don't know. I have no clue. Anybody have them at your house? And so, in a sense, we have that trust where my daughter's like, I'm going to this house. Like, okay. And then you find out they're not there because they went to someone else's house. It's like we know, or maybe we just believe they're
But
safe. Like,
that's
okay, they went in that yard and then they went across the street because they're not old enough to, like, okay, now we're teenagers, we're going to take off.
but
But
but you actually know your neighbors
yeah, that's the thing, is
and
we
you
know
know
the
their
neighbors and we know
children.
they're going to be one of
Yeah.
these houses, but
Right. See, I grew up like that too. I grew
yeah.
up in a place where I knew my neighbors and all the kids played together. Something interesting. I have a friend who's Orthodox, he's Orthodox Jewish cat, right? Builds guitars. Great guy. And he
So wait. What you're saying is now not only will Jewish people run the media and Hollywood, they're going to run music too?
oh, here we go.
I have to say something divisive. We need comments. We need hatred. We need
Exactly.
people angry at us to get the views. See what I did? I'm
Right.
helping us.
That's right. They're gonna take a page out of Mel Gibson's success plan.
Yes. He's famous, isn't he? That made him more famous than the couple movies before that.
Exactly. But he said,
He
he
builds
grew
guitars.
up, but he grew up Jewish, but and maybe even Orthodox, but there was a period of his life in his late teens to 20s where he was just, just kind of lived a life of a normal person, whatever that means. I don't,
He
you know
was
what I mean?
Jewish,
Like,
but then he became normal.
right?
And
But
I'm the
what I
one
mean
that's
is,
being insulting. Are you
what I
hearing this,
mean is
Jewish
like,
people?
what
Actually,
I
you're
mean
on the
is that
side of
like,
people.
if you're, but living an Orthodox lifestyle is very different than just living like I'm just gonna go be a regular
Yeah.
person because there's very specific rules and regulations and stuff, right? And then then as when he got married and had children, they moved to an Orthodox neighborhood and became Orthodox again. I suppose the boomerang returned home, right? And when I asked him about it, we were talking about it, and he said, "Well, so the thing about living in a community like this that's really interesting is everywhere my kids go, I know that they're going to be eating the way I would feed them. There's nothing crazy on the TV that I wouldn't be watching. Like, he knows that in every household, on average, his kids are going to get treated the same as they do in his household, minus the extreme amount of love and affection, obviously.
Yeah.
But just on the general stuff, they're going to get decent food, no nonsense on the TV or the radio. No one's gonna be cursing or doing just dumb shit around them. You know what I mean? And the streets are safe, and they can walk back and forth at night. And I was like, that is a fascinating thing because that is how I grew up too. And it wasn't an Orthodox community. It was just a working class, kind of semi-professional class neighborhood. You know what I mean? And we had that same kind of sense of community. And it sounds like you guys have that nowadays, which is fascinating. Like you trust these people enough to know that like your kids aren't going to be eating like shit over there, no worse than they eat at your place. They're not going to be watching anything crazier than they watch at your place.
And we
You know
got,
what I mean?
and if they do, we get a text. I mean,
Right.
we got a
Yeah.
text.
That's
Hey,
kind of
I'm taking
nice.
your
That's
kid to the Raptor Center. We're gonna go hiking. It's like, okay, I didn't even know she was at your house, but, and then we got a text after that. Is it okay if I take your kid to Culver's? And I was like, sure. It's do they have Culver's on the East Coast? Okay, it's like on a scale of 1 to 10, if McDonald's is a 1, it's like a 5. It's still fast food. It's an ice cream place. It's like it's like a better version of a Dairy Queen. So
Mhm.
it's junk food, but it's not like garbage like McDonald's. But either way, it got a text like, "Hey, is it okay if I take your kid to this fast food restaurant?" For the most part, like it's hand prepared, but you know what I mean. It's like, yeah, absolutely. If you're willing to buy my kid lunch, I'm not going to say no. It's a treat for them. But yeah, that's what happens.
Right.
It's
Yeah.
trust and checking in. We've done it with their kids. Like, hey, we're gonna go do this. Your kid's in the car. Is that cool? Yeah, we know each other.
Yeah.
It is what you said. It's a
That's
community.
actually, but and that's I think that's what I think is missing for most people. I think most people don't have that these days. Not in the same way. I
You
could
think
be
it's
wrong.
a city suburban thing?
No, because I go back. My sister's in the house that I grew up in right now.
Yeah.
Like she's in the house, and I go there, and they know the neighbors, but not really.
Hmm.
The kids don't hang out anymore. Like when I was a kid, it was like be home when the street lights come on, or be home for dinner time, or
Right.
whatever. Be within the sound of my loud voice when I yell your name. You better hear me, whatever. But and all the kids played in the street. Everybody knew everybody, and we went in and out of each other's houses all the time. It's not like that now. My nephew's there, and he doesn't have that kind of life. I don't know anybody who has that kind of life these days. It's all scheduled play dates and all kinds of stuff. You know what I mean? Like
Yeah. Well, we did
it's
that with
not,
our when the kids were younger, and Truman is young enough to where we'll still like the two neighbor boys that are a couple houses over. We'll like, hey, can they play? Because he's too young to just go knock on the door. But so it
yeah.
always happened within the past couple of years with Hilly, where
How
she
old is he?
he just turned 6 the other day.
Well, how old were you though when you could leave your house and knock on your neighbor's door?
Well, what you said earlier, when I was in third grade, whatever that is, that might be 8. My daughter is going into third grade. She's 8. So when I was 8, I was a latchkey kid. I walked, I could
Right.
look it
Yeah.
up. I did once through the not inner city of Milwaukee, but if I took you there and showed
Around
you
the
where I,
collards?
what's that?
Around the collards?
It was weird and scary. No, I was the honey nut Cheerio in the Cocoa Puffs. Or just the Cheerio in the Cocoa Puffs. I don't know why I had to put honey nut in there. I was just the Cheerio that fell in the Cocoa Puffs. or the chocolate Cheerios. I was I'm mixing cereals and metaphors. Well, not metaphors. Anyway, but yeah, I was a latchkey kid at 8 years old. My dad and mom were separated for a while, and so I would walk my ass to school and then walk home and let myself in and watch Fury and the Little Rascals, you know, racist shows, Black Horse, Alfalfa, no, not Alfalfa, Buckwheat. And yeah, that's where I was at 8. At 8, I was walking
Yeah,
in a city.
that was a perfectly normal thing for people who were not poor to do with their children.
Yeah.
That's what used to be a thing that only poor people experienced. Do you know what I mean? Like only poor kids were self-sufficient at 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, generally speaking, because both parents were working, right? It was like, you know, yeah, that's a weird thing, right? Like how many middle class, I knew tons of middle class, upper middle class,
We were lower middle class. I mean, like I said, we lived in the
but
lower half of a flat.
well, I mean, if you had to walk through the black neighborhood, obviously you weren't rich.
I was in the black neighborhood. Or, no, we
Right,
were in the
exactly.
periphery, but then we moved into it.
Right.
When
So
mom showed up and
obviously,
we got back together, we
right,
moved further into the black, closer to school. So it was like, oh, all
right,
right.
right,
I
exactly.
didn't have to
So
cut through the park anymore. The park that they eventually cut all the bushes out of because robbers and rapists. I combined those two words and said rape. I don't even know what I said. But yeah, the police eventually needed a clear line of sight across the park, so they had to cut out all the shrubbery and offend any Monty Python fans.
get you with your uh, IQ
References,
test jokes.
not even that, just dumb references.
That's actually something that, see, now here's something funny that I think is interesting. And I think it's arguably caused by multiculturalism in a weird way. It's a weird side effect of it. When we were kids, you could have said anywhere, up until very recently, anybody who was born before the year, I'm going to say 2005, if you went, these are not the droids you're looking for, they go, right?
Everyone would get
Like,
it.
because, right? And everybody would get it. And now people don't get that joke. You can say things like, well, we're going to need a bigger boat. And people go, huh? Right? Because there's no cultural narrative that goes through all races, genders, ethnicities, and things in the way that there used to be. Do you know what I
Well,
mean? Because you could say those jokes, like if we narrow races down to only two kinds of people, black people and white people, right? But really, just anybody who was born and raised in America, no matter what race you are, you could generally say certain song references and everybody gets them. It doesn't matter what it is, like, doesn't matter what style of music it is. There's certain references that that are just like the gambler. You got to know when to hold them, know
yeah.
when to fold them, know when to walk away, know when to run. I mean, anybody over a certain age gets that reference, even if they don't know it. They'll go, was that? So they'll know it's Kenny Rogers, or they'll think it's, or is it Willie, or is it this guy? But they'll
Yeah.
know what, you know what I mean? There's a sense of who it is. They know who Willie Nelson is, right? They're, you know what I mean? Even if they don't ever listen to country music, they know who Willie Nelson is. And like people, like there's none of that these days because there's 10,000 TV stations and 1,000 radio stations and 1,500 award shows, and do you know what I mean? Like,
That's
and everybody has their own thing, so there's no reason for you to know anybody else's thing. And now we can't communicate with each other because there's no common language that people use. So like, even when people say something like, and here's the example I heard the other day, which is like interesting. If somebody said to you, like you'll hear you people younger than us say this, well, that was a little rapey,
yeah. I've
right?
heard that phrase. Yeah.
And people say it's a little rapey, and then the other person will go, "Oh, that's not how I meant it." And they'll go, "Oh, okay, whatever, haha," because that was a little scary for a second. And then the conversation just keeps going like nothing. But I grew up in a time where somebody called you rapey, those are fighting words. You know
Well,
what I mean?
it's like
Like it's like It's
the
not a
word
thing you
rape
say to somebody.
carries a lot of
Like,
weight, or at least I thought it was supposed to.
right,
You know, it's like,
right. Like, that's not a thing. And I'm not saying that saying rapey is making light of it, because I think saying rapey is like a warning shot. Like,
right,
hey, watch where you're going. But they grew up in a world in which, like, I get kind of when the conservatives say, I can't even make a joke these days, right? Because they grew up in a time at which, like, how many times I'd be around white friends who just made all kinds of inappropriate jokes. It happened to me like about 5 or 6 years ago was the last time I actually consciously remember. I was in a place that I frequent. A friend of mine owns a store, and I was in his store, and we were just hanging out and just chilling. And then he said something that I hear white guys say all the time. Oh, you black guys. Whenever like some like you do something cool or something that they somehow feel like they can't do some for some magic reason, right? All the conservatives want to say that there's nothing special about black people. Black people don't have any special knowledge about anything because they're suffering. And then they also want to turn around and go, you black guys, like my conservative friends, like if I happen to be talking to a woman, you black guys are so good at talking to women. I'm like, I was just having a conversation with the woman, man. Like, that's
yeah.
because I'm black. It's because I'm personable, and you're a chicken shit. You know what I mean? Like, she terrifies you for some reason, and she's just a nice person. Just,
Well, she
you know
does
what I
have
mean?
breasts and a vagina, and those are
Right,
very
exactly, and
terrifying.
that's a very terrifying thing to conservative types. But,
Look at our vice president. He won't even be in a fucking room with one without his wife because he's so terrified of them.
right, but there was a point in there somewhere. I don't know. I lost it along
Well,
the
my head's
way.
swimming, so um, when it goes to the cultural narrative, or no, like Jaws, no big moment that we can all approach. You already touched on one thought I had, which was, yeah, there was a movie every summer, and that was it. Now there's 4 movies every weekend,
Right.
and like you said, 10,000 channels, and it, back in the day, it was controlled. Like,
Yeah, when Michael Jackson moonwalked, everybody saw it.
yeah,
Like there was
MASH.
only one thing to talk about, right?
110 million people watched the season finale of MASH, and they thought that that would be, achieved by Cheers in the 90s, but by then there were already, several more networks and cable and HBO. But you talk about rapey. I got into an argument, and I'll stand by my side because that's what I do with my ego. I can't be proved wrong. Thump thump. I have, my weak ego needs to defend itself. Someone watched the movie Animal House, and they got really pissed. They said it was a horrible movie. And this is someone that's obviously much younger. They got very angry and specifically talked about the scene where the girl from the checkout line comes to the party, gets drunk and passes out. And he's, is
Mm,
left holding, he's feeling up her bra and she passes out and he's holding toilet paper.
mm,
She patted her bra. You remember that scene?
mm-hmm. I
He was
do.
very angry because he said they that he almost date raped her. He said that he was considering raping her. It was just horrible. I was so disgusted. My girlfriend was disgusted. He was thinking about raping her. And I'm like, and my side was, well, yeah, but not only does he not do it, he date rape was not discussed back then. When I was a kid, when that movie was set, date rape was, I hate to say it, like, not accepted, but it wasn't talked about. In this movie, in this comedy, he has a moment where a lot of frat boys would have done the wrong thing, but he literally has a devil and an angel, his own conscience, saying,
Yeah.
fucker. And the angel says, don't. And he listens to his angel and he goes, I can't do this. And to me, I thought that was very powerful to have the discussion, like, this is the wrong thing to do, and he doesn't do it. And he was like, no, he thought about
Huh.
raping her. And that's like, yeah, nobody was having that discussion back then, and this movie got it right. It said horrible thoughts would go through a guy's mind at that time, and this was a step in the right direction of saying, you don't do that. And now we're at a point where hopefully, and we're not fully there, because I read the book Missoula by John Krakauer. It's a great book about women that get raped on dates, because it's disgusting. I don't want to go into it. Date rape still happens, but now it's discussed and it is condemned, rightfully so. But But back then, my whole point is Animal House, I think, really was progressive in a way, but it wasn't progressive enough for today, and that's what it was getting condemned for. And then if I had any other points, I don't know where they went, but I
Well,
thought of that when you said rapey.
here's what I will say. That reminded me of what I was talking about before. So my friend made this joke, right? I did something. He's a musician. We're talking about music, and he happens to think that like because he's a white dude, he can't ever play music like black people. And I was like, all right, whatever.
Probably true.
But then he said something. He says it's so stupid. Ultimately, he said, black may be beautiful, but tan is grand and white is the color of the main man or something. I was like, oh, good Lord. Like, it didn't even make me mad. I was just like, what are you, 12? But that's the kind of stuff I heard my whole life from
Yeah.
people. And the thing is that, like, you just learn to just, like, you hear that stuff from, like, people who are older than you with more power than you, and you just learn to take it because you want to keep your job or you want to do this or you want to do this or you don't want to rock the boat or whatever it is. And I think that now we're in a place where nobody does that anymore. Like I think that like people when
Or if
people
they
say
do,
I
they're
can't even
rightfully
make
condemned.
like I know there's a guy in Woodbridge, or maybe not Wood, there's a police officer who made a comment about a kid, and I'm paraphrasing. I heard this story. I didn't read it. I heard it from somebody. So
Right. So we
fact
can
check it,
Google, and
right?
people watching can Google.
But basically, there's a young black kid put up a post of like him, just like a cute picture of himself. He's like I don't know how old he was, but he said, "At what point do I stop becoming cute and start becoming a threat?" And the cop responded like, somewhere between 15 and 18, give or take a few years.
I knew that was going to be the
Now,
answer. It's like one of those jokes
right
where you know the
now,
punchline to.
it's funny. You're like, right, it's
Yeah,
funny. It's funny, dude. It's
it is.
funny. But
I
is
mean, but
that
it's
the kind of
coming from
shit
a figure
you
of
want a
authority. Like,
police officer
yeah,
telling?
if
Right?
I
Is that the
said it,
kind of
like I
joke?
put it on someone's status,
Right.
like that's Nate being an
Right.
asshole because he's a
Exactly.
comedian.
Right. I mean, but if a cop says it, then what his and I think he lost his job and he's
Yeah,
really pissed off about it. Now the thing is that like because people say, well, I used to be able to make a joke, but you only used to be able to make the joke because people were afraid to stand up for the fact that it bothered them because at that time if they said something they would have lost their job, so people just had a resilience to just deal with that. And so my guess is that when women saw that movie back in the day, it bothered them too. They just couldn't say anything about it. There was no agency for them to ever say anything, so the belief that it was okay is only partially true. I think that women who grew up in that time period probably have a resilience to it, right? Because if you're a successful woman in the 80s, what you had to tolerate to become successful was different. You know what I mean? Like there was very little help in that way, right? And so, like, I think nowadays people have more agency. Black people, women, gay people, whoever, there's a lot more agency. So, like, I think that it's not even that things don't didn't bother. It's like things are allowed to bother you now. Like back then, I couldn't let a black joke bother me because it literally would have been the difference of me being able to stay at a place of employment or not, or to be able to deal with this professor or not. Like I had professors do really dumb things, and it's like there was no agency. Like I asked a professor about black classical musicians, and he was like, "Well, yeah, why don't you let me know some and then I'll bring them to the class." Really, kid? Really, dude? I'm the student.
yeah. You
I'm
don't.
the student, and I have to teach you so that you can teach the class. The fuck is that? Like, what is that, right? But there was not even a thought in my head that I should complain to somebody about that because there was nobody to talk. There was nobody to complain to. Whereas nowadays, you might have that thought because there's actually, and you know what I mean? Like you're kind of like, I don't want to say you're only allowed to have the thoughts that you can only think of what you can conceive of. And there wasn't even a conception of a place where I could go. Like, of course, the cops were mean to me. They didn't shoot me. I wasn't afraid for my life. But of course, like, I got pulled over for drugs, and there were never any drugs in the car. And they ripped the car apart and took all my shit out and threw it all on the ground and gave me some bullshit ticket for something I wasn't doing. I went to court. The judge said you were. I paid the ticket. I took the 4 points. Do you know what I mean? But it
Yeah.
was bullshit. It was bullshit. Like, and I'm like, right, it happened, but it was just part of life. Like, it literally was just, it wasn't even something that, like, it made me mad every time my insurance premium, like, is quality of life shit. You know, my insurance premiums went up. So you just learn to yes sir, no sir, okay sir, I know. You just play the game because it's like, fuck, I can't afford this. You know what I mean? I can't afford to have my insurance premiums go up for bullshit, for something I didn't do, right? And so you just learn to tolerate stuff. And I think that, like, I'm not saying animal health. I agree with you. I
Okay,
think
that
that, like,
because I've been
we
waiting to go back to that point because I'm
yeah,
like,
right,
I'm listening to you and
right,
I
right.
agree with
But
everything
like,
you're saying.
I
But
think
when you said that, I think
right,
women would see it. I'm like, but he does the right thing. I think that was
right.
my so just
I
that one little.
I think,
I agree with everything
but
though.
I think that's the problem. I think the problem is that we've gotten to a point in which it's like thought police. You know what I mean? Like, we're at a point in which we believe every thought in our head is true somehow, when every thought is just a thought, right? Like,
Because
you've
we
seen,
can tweet our thought and we can get
right, and
responses
then it
and
becomes
feedback
real,
for it, and yeah,
right, and right, they solidify somehow, you know.
yeah, that because
And
our
I
thoughts
think that,
become
like, we're
legitimized.
and I think that, like, we have a lot of shame these days. We shame people a lot for their thoughts, for what they say, for asking a question. Like, if you ask the wrong question, people, they infer a bunch from that, and some of it is not accurate. Whereas back then, you were able to have a dilemma, which is how most of the fairy tales are, right? You have Red Riding Hood as, I can go down this path or this path. I can go stay on the yellow brick road or get off the yellow brick road. Everything has these paths and there's choices, and these stories are taught to us to teach us how to make choices. And now the choices are already guaranteed because there's bumpers along the yellow brick road, and the bumpers are, that's a little rapey. Oh shit, let's not go down that path. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah,
Like, you can't say it. Like, if you just ask a simple question like, what if both people are drunk beyond the point of consent? You know what I mean?
I
Someone will
do.
go, well, that sounds a little bit rapey. And you're like, well, okay, then you don't even ask the question. Now, I'm not saying I know the answer to the question. I'm just saying, but it's a question, right? It's a question. Like, what do you,
Well,
like,
just to
you
answer
know?
that question, this one this is my stock response, but this one I know. Um, it's not just I listened to a podcast. Malcolm Gladwell did a full episode on the Brock Turner situation and
Yeah.
um, just drinking and sex in general. And I'm not even going to try and do it justice. And it's amazing, but he does actually break that down. What if both people are drunk? And he doesn't let anyone off, but he talks about um, I'm not even going to try and say what he talks about. Malcolm Gladwell did a full hour on
Yeah.
drinking and rape and sex and consequences, and I
I
cannot
mean,
recommend it enough. It's
my understanding is that most of the sexual assaults that take place on college campuses are alcohol. There's alcohol
yeah,
involved,
and that he talks about that,
and
and
yet
it's
no college
revisionist
will
history.
outlaw alcohol.
I
No
don't know
college
which
will
one it
do
is,
it
but
because, yeah, like, none of the colleges will say no alcohol because nobody will go to their college,
yeah,
right? But, like, that is, like, I'm not saying that toxic masculinity isn't a thing, because I'm a dude and I know what dudes talk about when women aren't around,
yeah.
right? So I know they're right more often than they're wrong about what they say about dudes. The problem is that sometimes what dudes say is not what they do, right? And sometimes it's just venting, and sometimes it really is dangerous. Do you know what I mean? And I get that if you
There's a
can't tell
spectrum.
the
Yeah,
difference, right? But I get if you can't tell the difference, why take the chance, right?
yeah.
Like, they right, like, a guy could say I was just joking, and he really could be just joking, but why take the chance, right? But now it's a place where, like, it's like the jokes aren't allowed, which maybe that's okay. Like, I don't need to hear black jokes from strangers. You know what I mean? I can do them for my friends. Like, if you send me some fucking racist meme, I think it's fucking funny half
And
the
I always
time.
do.
I think that you're
Whenever I
right.
see
I think
something
that
racist, you're the
Yeah,
first
I think
person
that
I
shit's
send
fun.
it to.
I'm like, oh my god, that's some clever shit, man. And I'm like, man, white people got a lot of time. They say there's no white privilege, but man, they got enough time to sit around and do this
Well, I mean,
bullshit
and there's
all day.
also
It's
30 years
like,
of trust there where you know that when I'm sending you something, it's
right,
because I looked at
yeah,
it and went, holy shit, that's racist.
right, exactly, right. It's right, but like,
There's our
so
timer.
I could, all right, well, like, I could do without the racist jokes. I feel like I don't need to hear that stuff because
Yeah.
it doesn't, you know. But I would love to be able to have a place where we could ask, where like white people could say, yeah, racism might be part of it, but it's not all of it, right? Like this person may be maybe 30% racist, but 70% of it is this, and there is a spectrum, and maybe there are some things that black people could handle without saying that it's white people's fault, right? Now, is that fair, not fair, honest, not honest? I don't know. But I feel like white people should be allowed to say it. Do you know what I mean? Like we should be able to have a conversation. Like you should be able to say that, and I should be able to say, yes, that may be true, and white supremacy is a real problem. And let's find some place in the meet in the middle where if the goal is to make America better, this isn't going to be the way. Like there has to be some place where we have discourse that is reasonable. You know what I mean? And information, to get back to what you started off with, information we can trust that is free. Like somebody talked about local newspapers. That's what you should do. That's what you should do, man. You should start
Start a
writing for
local
the local.
newspaper?
Yeah, like start writing really good articles for the local newspaper that actually makes sense and like, whoa, little spider. Hey,
Maybe my
you,
dumb
sir,
cat can
are
come
gonna
eat
go
it.
there. Yeah.
That is,
But yeah, you know what I
where'd you
mean?
go?
But that should be fascinating. But no, but people said that like local news is not news anymore. Like nobody goes to it, nobody gets their local news,
No,
and
not my
so like
cable.
people don't actually know what's going on, and they don't, and people used to trust it, and maybe we need to have government sponsored legitimate local news that is important, and you get candidates' views on things, and people do stuff, and it's not this stuff that we have now. And I thought that was an interesting thought that like maybe we have a bunch of big like it's like what you have podcasts, you have HBO and Netflix, this and the other, but you also have podcasts. You know what I mean? And that's like the local news to a degree,
Yeah.
like not, you know what I mean, like
How many times
relative to the other
did
stuff.
I say it even in this episode? Most of my news comes from podcasts. Now I listen to like 20 of them, so they all get jumbled in,
Right.
but it's a spectrum. I've
Yeah.
got, slightly conservative, ultra liberal, yeah,
It would be interesting to have a local podcast or a local like if you could like if somebody would have a local news show that was the equivalent of a podcast. Just people who went around and were concerned and got dissenting voices or just different opinions and just sat in a panel and just talked about local things. That actually might be really interesting. You know what
I
I mean?
bet it would be a
Like
wonderfully low rated show on public access TV that no one would watch.
right, but why not? That's the problem. Like why
Earthquake,
wouldn't people care?
bump the
Like,
table.
you know what I mean? Like, why wouldn't they want? Why wouldn't they give a shit? Do you know what I mean?
I,
Like, it's like if nobody, like, the left and the right, nobody trusts either side. Nobody trusts either side scientists, either side's churches, either side's anything. Like, don't we need something where, like, we can all, like, don't we all need something to believe in? I know it sounds corny, but, like,
well,
we need a unifying thing. We don't have a unifying thing.
we
You know
do,
what I
and you
mean?
just said it right there. We have Brett Michaels. He gave us something to believe in. He sang it
Because
to us.
every rose has its thorn.
No, that's a different song. I'm
I
literally
know. I'm
going
trying
to
to
give
think
you
of all
something
the
to
how many,
believe in.
how many references can I make from them? How many of that can we string into a sentence? Good
I don't know.
lord.
But the reason I
Um,
interrupted you is because our timer,
because
like I said,
we're
the
out of
timer went
time.
off. And
Yeah, it's
so
fine.
you have a show this Saturday on the
Yes.
8th, August 8th. Where's it
Yeah.
going to be? Tell me, and I'll put it up at the bottom of the
Uh,
screen.
Donaldson's Farm. We're playing trio, Katie Henry trio, man. It's
Ooh, who's
exciting.
coming? A drummer? You got a drummer coming in?
Yeah, we got a drummer. Mighty Mike Dawson's gonna be with us, man. He's a beast. I like old Mike Dawson. That's gonna be a good time.
And what
So
you're
yeah,
talking
we're playing
about for
trio.
new viewers, listeners joining in, it's the Katie Henry Band. Barrett is the
Yeah,
musical director, so you can find her at katiehenrymusic.com.
absolutely.
You can find the musical director, bass player at antargoodwin.com. And say the
He
name again,
is.
because when I'm scanning through this, say the name
Mm-hmm.
again of the venue.
Donaldson's Farm.
Donaldson's Farm. I'll Google
It's
that.
on. If you go to
You got to live in New
Facebook.
Jersey, folks, or New York, or somewhere
Yeah,
close.
yeah. If you go to Facebook, Katie Henry Music, there'll be an event there, or on the website katiehenrymusic.com. It's on. I should put it on mine too, though. But yeah, we actually have gigs coming up. It's exciting. We actually have like legit gigs coming in, like almost one or two reasonable ones a month, and like one a weekend, but one or two good ones a month. It's like shocking. We're like actually starting to do gigs again.
Meanwhile, I lost an October gig today. They just flat up
In
canceled it, saying,
October?
nope, COVID will still be here.
All right,
Every
let's talk
fucking
off
comedy
air.
gig I have is just,
After we're done recording, we'll talk for a few more minutes.
all right.
But yeah, all right.
Well,
So
since I'm not gigging, you can visit nathantimmel.com, go to the merch page, buy something. You can go find books on amazon.com or search for Nathan Timmel. You can find CDs on
yeah,
Spotify, Pandora, Apple Music.
and
You can stream them or you
find
can
him
buy
on
them, whatever you want to do.
find him on Instagram and Facebook too. He's got some funny posts up there.
Yeah, sometimes when I remember to post on Instagram. Facebook I post on all the time. Instagram I haven't fully figured out, but that's where this is viewed on Instagram. So, all right,
Yeah,
that's all of it. We will talk at you
yeah.
next
We'll see you
week.
later.
Thanks for hanging out. Goodbye.
Yeah.